We're now joined by Matt Tait, Lawrence Journal-World. He joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Matt, thank you. We've had you on many times. Always great insight for Kansas. Who would you say right now, among the four who are all obviously playing very well, is Kansas the most red hot of the four entering the Final Four?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's got to be KU or Duke. I think offensively, Duke's probably the answer. Duke seems like they've been on an absolute terror on the offensive end. Their defense is leaving a little to be desired and still hasn't really been anything to write home about or anything like that, whereas I think the Kansas defense has really improved and been a strength for them this postseason. But to say one over the other, I don't know if you can quite do that, but I do think obviously all four teams are hot. I mean, you could really make a case that North Carolina's as hot as anybody. The way they beat Baylor, as you guys know, really just propelled them to this new. It was almost like they then became the one seed, right? They underachieved all year, and then they knock off Baylor, and then they're on that one seed path, and then they started playing with that swagger and that confidence of just like, we're Carolina and we're gonna kick everybody's butt, and they've done that. I mean, St. Peter's was an amazing story, an amazing team that was beating some of the best teams in college basketball when you look at Kentucky and Purdue especially, and then all of a sudden they show up with everything in the world to play for against Carolina, and it was never close. So I think all four teams are really hot, and I think Bill Self said yesterday that any one of these four can win this thing, and that's what makes this such a powerhouse Final Four, and of course the history and the tradition and just everything that goes into all four of those programs. But man, I've covered four of these, and this is definitely the coolest that I've seen it, just because of all the tradition with all four programs, and then you've got the Coach K storyline and all that stuff. I mean, it's been a long week, so we get to play basketball tomorrow, and by we I mean they, and I'm ready to watch.
Matt, if Kansas and Villanova gets into the 70s, would you say that means Kansas is probably going to win the game? But if Villanova can keep it in the 60s, then they have a reasonable shot to knock off the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, what Jay Wright has talked about all week is just how impressed he is with KU in transition and their speed and what kind of challenge that presents for Villanova. So I don't know that he's going to go into the game trying to take that away entirely, but I do think they'll do some things to try to slow that down, and whether it works or not is another story. But I also think that their style, the way they play anyway, is sort of predisposed to be that type of game, and it's not like they're going to have to do anything out of the ordinary for them. They're just going to have to execute and play very well. So I think that benefits them. It's not like they have to go out there and change who they are just because, well, this team has to, or we match up with this team differently. We better do this or zig or zag or whatever. I don't think that's the case at all. I think they're going to be who they are, and Kansas is going to show up and try to be who it is. And whichever one can sort of assert their will on the other is probably going to have a really good chance. And when you look at it in those terms, you have to like KU's chances, just because Villanova without Justin Moore, major loss, man. I mean, you hate to see that happen to any program at this time of year, especially for the young man himself. But that's a big, big loss. And they're lucky, I guess, in a sense that it happened in an Elite Eight game and not a Sweet 16 game, because to turn around Sweet 16 to Elite Eight and try to adjust and figure that out in one day would have been really challenging. They have at least had all week to get their heads around how they're going to play without him. And I'm sure they'll be ready. I mean, they've got talent and they've got next man up philosophy and all that stuff. But there's just, it'd be like taking Christian Brown off of this Kansas team. If Kansas was playing without him, you would have to say advantage whoever the opponent is. I mean, it's just that player, that type of presence on a roster, on a team, on the floor, all that is just, I mean, that's just so hard to overcome. So by no means do I think it's going to be easy for Kansas. I think Villanova is way too tough, way too disciplined, way too experienced to just show up and be like, well, we have this built-in excuse. We'll take it. We're going to try hard, but boy, we probably just don't have it in the cards for it to be us. There's no way that's how they're going to think. They're going to think we should win this game, and they're going to find a way to do it. But again, I just think it's a huge advantage for Kansas that's a team they're matching up with without one of their best players, and then they were already sort of thin to begin with, and now they're even thinner. So, Kansas is going to want to push, play as fast as they can, but that's nothing new. They've been trying to do that for the last month and a half, and they've done it really well.
Matt, obviously they've had to be patient, and Remy Martin is paying off for right now, but how close was it where Bill Self was just kind of not fed up, but just did not know if he'd ever turn the corner? I know he was hurt at some point, but there still seemed like there was still something missing.
Yeah, he was hurt. He was hurt a long time, and I think it was really close. And not because Self didn't want to give him time, and not because Self didn't want him to come back, but because at some point you just have to cut bait. You know, like you can't go into the postseason preparing to play a guy that you haven't seen play in 2 months. And it didn't get to that, but if he wasn't able to come back when he did, they were getting really close to having no time to get him reacclimated and to get the chemistry back with his teammates and things like that. And as it was, it took a little time. I mean, they were on a pretty good run. I think they'd won 7 or 8 in a row before they came down to Waco. And that was actually Remy's first game back. And he didn't do much that night, but they lost, you know, and by no means was anybody, myself included, saying, oh, Remy's back, they lost, there's the reason. You know, it wasn't that. It had everything to do with Baylor that night. But it was sort of an underlying thing in that game, I think, where at least for me, it really made me look at that and go, oh, yeah, I guess they weren't used to those minutes going to that guy, and nobody's really used to what he does on the floor, and that includes him. So they kind of did that, readjustment on the fly, and really you have to give everybody involved a ton of credit. You give Remy credit, you give Self and his staff credit, you give the KU players credit. I mean, they have all made this thing work to the point where it has gotten them to New Orleans, and they wouldn't be here without it. There's no question about that. So it was close because I think Self needed to see 3, 4, 5 games with Remy, at least available and as healthy as he could be before he was going to say, yeah, I'll trust that guy and play him in the tournament. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen if he didn't come back in time. So it was close, but man, it all lined up perfectly, and they ended up getting this late season addition, wild card, X factor, whatever you want to call him. And not only has that added to their team, not only has that made them a different team, but it's also made Kansas really hard to scout. And I wrote a whole story about this a couple weeks ago. I mean, there's just not a lot of film on what KU looks like with Remy. There's more now than there was, at the start of the tournament. But when you start this thing and you don't have but 8 to 10 minutes here and there of quote unquote good Remy on film, I don't know how you scout. I talked to a couple of coaches. I talked to McDermott at Creighton. I talked to Scott Drew, in fact, about it. I talked to the Texas Southern coach, a couple others, and almost across the board, they all said, well, we've seen Remy before. We know what he's capable of from his time at Arizona State. And while that is true, and he is still in many ways that same guy, he's not exactly that. And Kansas is a whole different story, and they're using him differently. And so, scout it that way at your own risk. I don't think that's the way to do it. I mean, if it was just a one-on-one game or a pickup game, maybe, but he's being used totally different than he was in the past, and that's been an advantage for Kansas too, because it's just really hard to prepare for.
Well, and he's not. It's not like he's broken into the starting lineup, and Bill Self still leaves him on the bench for longer periods of time than the guy who's the leading scorer normally would be, and they're able to just do that and navigate through these games. So it's been, I'm sure, even harder because you're like, well, normally if a guy's as hot as he is, he'd be in the game longer, but that's not been the case necessarily.
Yeah, no, it's a testament to this whole team and how close they are and how much they want to win. I mean, I even asked Self earlier this week if he considered starting Remy, because like you said, he's been so hot. And he said, no way, not even for a second. He said, DeJuan Harris is our starting point guard, and we've won 32 games with him. So let's just not mess up what we have going right now. And you know, it's again, it's a real credit to the players and DeJuan Harris specifically. I mean, this is a guy who could easily play 30 minutes and run the show, but he doesn't care. He wants to win, and he loves Remy, and they have a great bond. They have a great dynamic. I mean, this group for a group that's, you know, had to welcome some new pieces and new faces in, they really are really connected and really have a tight bond, and that's benefited them as much as anything. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the way Bill is using Remy is a coach's dream, right? You've got another guy that you can trust and you feel good about starting, and he's got good chemistry with your other four out there, and he's such a smart player, and you can trust him and all that stuff. And then at the under 16 timeout, that first media timeout, 4, 5, 6 minutes into the game, you can get Remy up and you can say, go do your thing, go be you, and bring some energy, bring some personality, bring some electricity. And he does it. And I mean, he's come in like clockwork in that spot in the same time of every game here lately. And I mean, he comes in and almost immediately, like within seconds, almost immediately makes an impact and gets the team on a whole other trajectory. I mean, they just catch momentum just from him simply being out there. So, you know, rotation and guys knowing roles and all those things are so important to get to this point. I mean, there's so many talented teams in the country. There's so many teams that could be here, but a lot of times it's the team that has that stuff locked up, where guys just know who they are, they know what they're expected to do, and they have a comfort within that. And this team has exactly that. I mean, Bill says it's basically a case of him having 7 starters, and you know he's counting Remy and he's counting Mitch Lightfoot as a 7th starter there. And you know, you have 5 starters. We all know that, but but that shows you how just important that 7-man rotation has been. And then after that, they've got a couple other guys that they can throw out there situationally or whatever they need. But, you know, for now, especially in the tournament with these long timeouts and all that stuff, that's been their team. And they've obviously done very well with that group. And now they're 2 wins away from a title, and they're going to be the 2 hardest wins they get all year.
So we know what North Carolina, Duke, and Kansas have historically. And then we know that Villanova recently, as much as anybody, has had success with what they've done. Your thoughts about if all 4 are in the building at one time, how do you rank the fan bases?
Oh, in terms of what? Just how much they bring it?
How much they bring it. I would think Villanova is passionate, but they probably don't have the numbers, obviously, as what Kansas, North Carolina, and Duke, even though Duke's a private school, you know, you wonder about if you were to rank the 4 fan bases, what would you say in order, 1 through 4?
Yeah, I don't want to cop out on you here. I don't want to say Duke, Carolina, and Kansas are equal, because I don't know that that's exactly true. But man, I'll tell you what, if it's not true, it's close.
Yep.
I would probably just, you know, Kansas fans travel so well. It's hard for me to rank them 1, though, because maybe I'm just too close to it. I understand it. I've seen it. It doesn't look overwhelming to me because I've seen it for so many years now. So I get the feeling that it's Duke that ranks number 1 by a hair. And then I think Kansas is probably 2. Carolina's right there at that same level or just a hair behind in 3, and then Villanova in 4. So, you know, gun to my head type of thing. That's how I would rank them. I'll tell you what would have been easier, though, if you put Kentucky in this mix.
Oh, yeah.
They're ranked number 1 because their fans are insane. So it would have been an easy choice then. And we see it. You know, we see that at the Champions Classic every year. It's KU, Duke, Kentucky, and Michigan State. And even though it's not the Final Four and their whole fan base doesn't sell out to come down and enjoy that, nothing like that, it's the opening game of the season, and it's usually in New York City or Chicago or somewhere cool, you know. So we get a taste of that, and it is always Kentucky. But Duke travels very well, and they're a national brand too, and Kansas is right there too. So it's I heard yesterday that it's 71,500 tickets pre-sold out here already. It's going to be the largest group to ever watch a Final Four. It's, I would imagine, going to be television rating records. You throw in the fact that it's Coach K's swan song, it just adds to it, and that's what's so cool about this Final Four. It's four crazy good programs that are playing great basketball, but there's so many more storylines than just, oh, these four good teams made it, because you don't get Final Fours without four good teams.
Yep.
I mean, anybody that gets here is a good team year after year after year. So, you know, the added stuff that's going on here, the added storyline, just remarkable stuff. And like I said, it's been a long week. I'm sure it's way longer for these players. I mean, you know, you go 3 days in a row in the Big 12 tournament, and then you go back to back a couple of weekends with a day in between to have to sit here and wait for the biggest game of your life all week. It's got to be absolutely killing them. I'm sure they're taking the rest and enjoying that, but like I said, I'm tired of writing about it. I want to watch the game and see what happens, and really both games. So it's a cool thing, because, you know, after the last couple of years where the 2020 tournament got canceled, and then last year, as great as that was, you know, it was different. Fans weren't there. It wasn't the full pageantry of the tournament, and there were some fans, but obviously not the full house and everything. But everything's back this year, and it feels same as it ever was. So I think the fact that it's these four teams in that moment is really cool too.
Yeah, Smokey and I got to experience the Kentucky fans in Atlanta when the Baylor played them in the Elite Eight in 2012.
Sure. Oh, no, there's nothing like it. Yeah.
It was like there was one section of the Georgia Dome for Baylor, Xavier, and I can't remember who else was there.
Was it Creighton?
Yeah.
No,
Creighton was the week before.
Yeah.
But then, like, the rest of it was like Kentucky fans were like, this is just our spot. It was ridiculous.
Well, let me tell you a quick story about 2012 when KU was here last, and that was the last time it was here, in fact. It was Kansas and Kentucky in the title game that year. And I don't care how long I live, I will never forget it. I was walking down Canal Street near Bourbon Street during the day, I think on arrival day or whatever, and Kentucky had just checked into their hotel. And they're right on the corner, right near Bourbon Street, and there's on the front, above the entrance, there's a little balcony. I don't know if it comes off of a ballroom or a dining room, or if it's off of a suite or whatever it is. I don't know, but it's a little balcony that you can walk out onto. And John Calipari stepped out onto that balcony, and you'd have thought you were in Vatican City with the Pope. I mean, he was doing the slow wave to everybody, and they were down below just looking up, gazing at him, adoring, roaring. I mean, it was as cool a thing and as crazy a thing as I can ever remember seeing in terms of basketball fandom. So that you know, I don't even know if any of these four teams are staying at that hotel, but I know none of these four coaches jumped out on that balcony and got the Pope treatment.
Yeah, and that was Indiana, Paul, in Atlanta. How about that?
Yeah.
Kentucky, Indiana, which is 10 years ago when they were still, you know, they're not quite another 10 years in their drought, but Xavier, Baylor, and Kentucky still dominated even with Indiana. Matt, I know you got to go. One more thing. We know KU and their history, the 3 national titles, 88 Danny Manning, and then, of course, the one with Bill Self as well. And they've been close. How critical, any national title, we know what it did for Baylor last year, but that was their first, and it made it even more special. But how important would it be for him to notch another one right now?
I think it's massive. I mean, he talked about it a little this week. He's never really one to talk about that because he is program. You know, I mean, he'll be the first to tell you, and he said it on 100 different occasions that Kansas is bigger than any one person. The program, the history, the tradition, all that stuff. So Bill Self's the last guy that's going to make this about him. But I have thought, as long as I've known him, that the motivation of getting a second title is massive. I think it would validate him. I think it would make him, you know, it would elevate him into that next tier, right? I mean, I think the belief is that anybody can win one, and a lot of guys have, but can you do it again? Because it's, as you guys know, it's so damn hard to win one that you cherish it, you embrace it, you enjoy every second of it. If it's all you get, you remember it for the rest of your days. But it's hard, and so if you can do that and then do it again, whether it's a year later or 10 years later, it doesn't matter. You can do it again. I think then you're in a totally different tier. So I think it'd be big for him. I think it's always fueled him. But I think a lot of that is just internal. I don't think he would ever talk about it. And in fact, he talked about it this week, just briefly, but he talked about how, look, this would be big for our program. And the reason is, you look around at the other three schools that are here, Villanova won 2 in 3 years, 2016 and 2018. North Carolina's won 3 in the time that Bill Self has been here. Duke's won a couple in the last 9 or 10 or 11 years, and so Kansas is sort of the ugly duckling here that hasn't been on that level, at least in Bill Self's time at Kansas. And so, he, in no uncertain terms, said, if we have as good a program as anybody, and maybe better than most, and that's really, you can't even debate that. And he would stand there and talk to you all day long about why Kansas is the best. But he said, but if we want to claim that, for every possible way and at every possible minute, we can't get further behind in these titles. We have to cut nets on Monday, and we have to do it again, and we have to do it again after that. And so, for the legacy of the program, for the brand that is Kansas basketball, I think this is big, and that's what he's focused on. And of course, that's what the players are focused on. But you know what? They want to win for themselves, and they want to win for him. And I think this team is it's as close a group as I remember seeing in a long time. And that's not to say they haven't had close teams. They have. This is just a different level, and I think it's largely because of not only the experience that they have and how much time some of these guys have been there and been with Self, but also just because of, man, what the sport and what the world has gone through the last couple of years. It's brought guys closer together, because there were times there you had nobody but you. I mean, in 2020, they were as good a team as there was. They were ready to be the number 1 overall seed heading into that tournament, and they didn't even get a chance to go play for it. A lot of these guys were there then, and they remember that. And that would suck. I mean, I'm not sure I would ever get over that, So they had to wake up on March 14th or whatever it was and go, well, I guess it's just you and me now. We've only got each other because we're not going to go have a chance to make a run. So let's get back to work and try to do it again next year. And so it took 2 years, but they're back here, and this is where they believe they should have been all along. And now they get a chance to, like I said, they get a chance to swing for the fences. And if they can win 2 more games, all of their lives will change, including Bill Self, because as you said, the one is good. And as I pointed out, anybody can do that. There's been a lot of guys do that, but if he can get that second one, his life will change too.
Matt, great stuff as always. Thanks. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks. Bring the Big 12 home a championship. We appreciate your time.
That's what he was talking about today. He even gave a shout out to Coach Drew for always banging the drum for the Big 12. So I think there's a lot of Big 12 people probably rooting for Kansas, and it'll be a hell of a show.
Matt Tait, Lawrence Journal-World, covers Kansas, is very, very insightful and also knowledgeable. And I thought that Bill Self question is important. They have been knocking on the door. He won it, of course, as we mentioned, in 2008. They've been to the Final Four since then, and 12 lost to Kentucky. 18 lost to Villanova. 22, that's where they are coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that the 2 teams that probably felt the most, and maybe Gonzaga a little bit because they were a good team, but the 2 teams that felt 2020 the most were Baylor and Kansas, because they were both playing really, really well down the stretch, and Kansas, but Baylor was a little banged up. I know that you asked Mark Vidal, any of those guys, COVID is the thing that derailed them from winning in 2020, but they were a little banged up, and Kansas was healthy, and that to me would have given Kansas the edge in 2020, but I mean, they were kind of on a collision course then.
So tomorrow, what time do I come over to watch?
I mean, you'll be sitting in the living room with me while Amanda sits in a different room.
Amanda is a KU fan, and it's pretty.
It's intense.
It's, you think, edgy right now with Armstrong?
Oh,
this is on a level that is.
What I try to do on game days is we have the most fun we possibly can beforehand, so that way she can look back on the day and go, that was a fun early part of the day, and then she gets real tense. Like, we'll be driving back from somewhere, and she's like, it's an hour and 45 minutes of the game. I'm tense, and I'm like, yeah, well, and so
she's the one that barked at Jack.
She did bark at Jack. She did. Jack, I need you to stop talking.
All right.
Creighton went on a 6-0 run. Jack said something. And Amanda, you know what I'm talking about.
What? Jack didn't know this?
You didn't hear that at the game?
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Like, Jack, I need you to stop talking.
Like,
oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
All right.
All right.
There
Well,
we go.
so we've got, we focused in today on North Carolina and Kansas. Hope you've enjoyed throughout the year the coverage. Monday, of course, somebody's going to play. Two teams are going to play for the national championship Monday in New Orleans, which is a great place to always be for a short little stint. We were there for